Karen spent the rest of the day in her home office, surrounded by HOA documents and city ordinances spread across her mahogany desk. The certified letter from Marcus sat opened in front of her, its contents exactly as he'd claimed. She'd made a tactical error, and now she needed to regroup. Her phone rang. "Karen, this is Linda Chen from 1251 Maple." Linda's voice carried the breathless excitement of fresh gossip. "I heard there was some kind of police situation at the new neighbor's house." "Code enforcement, not police," Karen corrected, though she didn't bother explaining the difference. "Just routine compliance checking." "Well, I wanted you to know that the noise has been absolutely unbearable. That machine started up again after lunch, and it's giving me a headache." Karen sat up straighter. "What time did it start?" "1:15. I was trying to take my usual nap, and that awful grinding sound woke me up." "Linda, you might have just given me exactly what I need." Karen grabbed her pen and began taking notes. "The city noise ordinance prohibits construction sounds above 65 decibels between 1 p.m. and 2 p.m. for afternoon quiet hours. Is that really a thing?" "Oh, it's very much a thing." Karen was already pulling up the city's website. "I need you to make an official complaint. Call the non-emergency line and report a noise violation." After hanging up, Karen called 3 more neighbors, each living within 2 blocks of Marcus's house. Mrs. Patterson from Oak Street complained about the dust. The Johnsons mentioned truck traffic. By 4 p.m., Karen had orchestrated a symphony of complaints, each one targeting a different aspect of the pool removal project. She stood at her window again, watching the excavator work. Marcus walked around the job site, occasionally talking to the operator. He looked relaxed, confident. That confidence irritated Karen more than the noise ever could. Her phone buzzed with a text from Danny. "Karen, I'm getting multiple calls about the same address. What's going on?" She typed back quickly. "Just concerned citizens exercising their rights. This feels like harassment. This is community enforcement. There's a difference." But as Karen looked at her notebook filled with complaint strategies and violation research, she wondered if there really was a difference anymore. She'd never had to work this hard to maintain control before. Previous violations had been simple: unauthorized paint colors, unapproved mailboxes, holiday decorations left up too long. Those residents had apologized quickly and fixed their mistakes. Marcus was different. He followed rules precisely, anticipated objections, and refused to be intimidated. It was almost like he'd dealt with HOA enforcement before. Karen opened her laptop and began searching for Marcus's name online. If he wanted to play games, she'd make sure she knew exactly who she was dealing with. What she found in the search results made her stomach drop. Marcus Chen wasn't just some random tech worker. He was a former municipal planning attorney who'd specialized in HOA disputes. The first Google result was a news article about him winning a major case against an overzealous homeowners association in California. "Well," Karen said aloud, staring at Marcus's professional headshot on a law firm website. "Now we're playing for keeps." Karen's research continued late into the night. Marcus Chen had left his law practice 8 months ago to work for a software company, but his legal background explained everything. He'd moved to Willowbrook Estates knowing exactly how to navigate HOA regulations, and he'd been 3 steps ahead of her from the beginning. The next morning, she called an emergency HOA board meeting. The 5 board members gathered in her dining room, looking confused and slightly annoyed at the 7 a.m. start time. "We have a problem," Karen announced, placing Marcus's legal background research in front of them. "Our new resident is a former attorney who specializes in HOA disputes." Board member Janet Torres rubbed her eyes. "Karen, why are we here?" "The man filed proper paperwork and has valid permits, because he's setting a precedent. If we let him operate without proper oversight, every homeowner in Willowbrook will think they can do whatever they want." "But he did follow proper procedures," said Tom Bradley, the board treasurer. "I reviewed his submission myself yesterday. Everything was correct." Karen felt her authority slipping. "Tom, you should have consulted with me before making any decisions. The rules don't require consultation for notifications. They require consultation for approvals." Tom's voice carried an edge she'd never heard before. Maybe we should review our own procedures before questioning his. The meeting deteriorated from there. For the first time in her 12-year tenure, Karen found herself defending her decisions instead of making them. By 8 a.m., 3 board members had voted to officially approve Marcus's pool removal, making Karen's opposition meaningless. After everyone left, Karen sat alone in her dining room, staring at the scattered paperwork. Her phone rang. Ganny again. Karen, I've gotten 17 calls about 1247 Maple Street in the past 24 hours. This has to stop. Those are legitimate complaints from concerned residents. No, they're not. I know you organized this because Mrs. Patterson called me Officer Rodriguez instead of Officer Rodriguez, and she's never gotten my name wrong in 15 years of knowing me. Karen's face burned. I don't know what you're implying. I'm not implying anything. I'm telling you directly. Back off. If I get one more manufactured complaint about this address, I'm filing a harassment report. The line went dead. Karen walked to her window and looked across the street. The excavator was gone, but Marcus stood in his backyard with 2 other men, apparently planning the next phase of his project. As she watched, he looked directly at her window and raised his hand in a friendly wave. She didn't wave back, but something in his gesture made her realize he wasn't just aware of her watching. He was expecting it. He'd probably been expecting her entire campaign against him. Karen grabbed her car keys. If the city wouldn't help her, and her own board was turning against her, she'd have to find another way to maintain control. She drove to City Hall, determined to find some regulation, some oversight, some authority that Marcus Chen hadn't anticipated. What she found instead was a planning department that knew Marcus by name and a building inspector who spoke about him with genuine respect. Karen left City Hall with the sinking realization that she wasn't just outmatched, she was completely outgunned. Karen's final gambit came on Friday afternoon. She'd spent 3 days researching obscure municipal codes until she found it, a 1987 ordinance requiring soil contamination testing for any excavation within 500 feet of the old Willowbrook Creek bed. The creek had been diverted decades ago, but the ordinance remained on the books. She called the Environmental Compliance Office, reported a potential violation, and waited. Within 2 hours, a city environmental inspector arrived at Marcus's house, stopping all work pending soil testing. Karen watched from her window as Marcus spoke with the inspector, his calm demeanor finally showing cracks. The excavator operator covered his equipment with tarps and left. For the first time in a week, 1247 Maple Street was quiet. That evening, Karen's doorbell rang. She opened it to find Marcus standing on her porch, holding a manila envelope. Mrs. Pemberton, I think we need to talk. I have nothing to say to you. Actually, you do. Marcus held up the envelope. Because I have something to show you. Against her better judgment, Karen let him in. They sat in her living room, the same room where she'd first spotted his pool removal project. Marcus opened the envelope and laid out several photographs. These are pictures of my backyard from the day I moved in. Notice anything unusual? Karen studied the images. The pool looked normal, surrounded by concrete decking and landscaping. Look closer, Marcus said, pointing to one corner of the pool. See that dark staining on the concrete? And the way the grass won't grow in that area. Karen saw it now. A roughly circular area where the concrete was discolored and the surrounding lawn was patchy and thin. I had the soil tested before I bought the house, Marcus continued. The previous owners had a leak in their pool's chemical system. The ground is contaminated with chlorine and pool chemicals. I'm not removing the pool because I don't want it. I'm removing it because it's poisoning my yard. Karen stared at the photos, her mouth dry. Why didn't you tell anyone? Because I'm not trying to hurt property values or create panic. I'm fixing a problem quietly and properly. Marcus gathered the photos. But when you called in that environmental inspection, you forced me to disclose the contamination officially. Now it's on the public record. The implications hit Karen like a physical blow. An official contamination report would be public information, accessible to potential buyers, real estate agents, and mortgage companies. Property values in Willowbrook Estates would take a hit, and it would be her fault. The environmental inspector wants to test the soil in surrounding properties, Marcus continued, to determine if the contamination has spread. Your house is first on the list. Karen's hands shook. My house? But I'm not selling. No, but if they find contamination in your yard, you'll be required to disclose it if you ever do sell. And your homeowner's insurance might not cover environmental remediation. Karen looked out her window at her perfectly manicured lawn, her prize-winning rose garden, her property that had been her sanctuary for 20 years. What do you want? I want you to stop, Marcus said simply. I want to fix my problem, restore my yard, and be a good neighbor. But I can't do that if you're constantly looking for ways to cause trouble. And if I agree, then I'll ask the environmental inspector to limit his testing to my property only. The contamination disclosure will be minimal, and the impact on neighborhood property values will be negligible. Karen sat in silence for a long moment. Every instinct told her to fight, to find another angle, to maintain her authority. But looking at Marcus's calm, reasonable expression, she realized something that shook her to her core. She'd been wrong from the beginning. Fine, she said quietly. But I want regular updates on your progress. Marcus smiled for the first time since she'd met him. I'll email you weekly reports. And Mrs. Pemberton, I really do want to be a good neighbor. After he left, Karen stood at her window, watching the evening light fade over Willowbrook Estates. She'd maintained her authority, but at what cost? And why did victory feel so much like defeat? As she watched, Marcus's house lights came on, and she could see him in his kitchen, apparently cooking dinner. He looked content, settled, like someone who planned to stay for a long time. Karen realized she'd have to learn to live with that. The question was, could she learn to live with herself? The phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize. Mrs. Pemberton, this is Rebecca Martinez from 1255 Oak Street. I'm calling about my neighbor's new fence. Karen closed her eyes. It was starting all over again. 20 minutes later, Karen watched with satisfaction as Officer Rodriguez's white city truck pulled into Marcus's driveway. She changed into her navy blazer, the one she wore to HOA meetings, and grabbed her leather portfolio containing printed copies of every relevant ordinance. The excavator had stopped working, its engine ticking as it cooled. Marcus stood in his backyard, confusion written across his face as Danny approached with his clipboard. Karen marched across the street, her heels clicking against the asphalt. Officer Rodriguez, thank you for responding so quickly. Ma'am, I'm here in an official capacity, Danny said, his voice carefully neutral. Are you the complainant? I am. As HOA president, I have a duty to report violations. Karen opened her portfolio with theatrical precision. This resident has begun major demolition work without obtaining proper permits or HOA approval. Marcus wiped his hands on his jeans. I'm sorry, what's the problem? I'm removing my own pool on my own property. The problem, Karen said, stepping closer, is that you violated Section 4.3 of our HOA covenant regarding property modifications, plus city ordinances requiring permits for pool removal. I have permits, Marcus said. I submitted everything 2 weeks ago. Karen felt her confidence waver for exactly 1 second. That's impossible. All HOA applications must be approved by the board before any work begins. Marcus disappeared into his house and returned with a manila folder. Here's my city permit, approved last Friday. And here's my HOA submission form, submitted on the 15th. I have the certified mail receipt. Danny examined the documents while Karen's face flushed red. She snatched the HOA form from Marcus's hand, scanning it quickly. The application was complete, properly filled out, and clearly dated 2 weeks prior. This wasn't presented to the board, she stammered. According to your own rules, minor modifications like pool removal only require board notification, not approval, Marcus said calmly. I sent it certified mail to ensure proper documentation. Karen's hands shook slightly as she flipped through her portfolio. She'd been so focused on catching him in a violation that she'd forgotten to check her own mail. The certified letter was probably sitting on her kitchen counter right now, unopened. Officer Rodriguez, everything appears to be in order, Danny said. The permits are valid, and the HOA notification was properly submitted. But the noise ordinance, Karen began. Work started at 9 a.m., well within legal hours. Marcus interrupted. I specifically waited until after the 8 a.m. cutoff to be respectful of my neighbors. Danny closed his clipboard. No violations here. Have a good date, folks. As the code enforcement truck pulled away, Karen stood in Marcus's driveway, her perfectly planned ambush crumbling around her. The excavator operator started his engine again, and Marcus gave her a polite nod before walking back toward his house. This isn't over, Karen called after him, but her voice lacked its usual authority. For the first time in 12 years, Karen Pemberton had been outplayed on her own turf. Karen Pemberton's morning coffee went cold as she pressed her face against the living room window, watching the excavator tear into her neighbor's backyard. The machine's mechanical arm ripped through the concrete edge of what had been a perfectly good swimming pool just yesterday. This is absolutely unacceptable, she muttered, her breath fogging the glass. The Willowbrook Estates Homeowners Association handbook clearly stated that any major property modifications required written approval from the board. She should know. She'd memorized every clause during her 12 years as HOA president. The new neighbor, some tech guy named Marcus, who'd moved in 3 months ago, hadn't submitted a single form. Karen had been waiting for him to slip up, and now he'd handed her the perfect violation on a silver platter. She grabbed her phone and speed-dialed Officer Rodriguez, her brother-in-law who worked for the city's code enforcement division. Danny, I need you to get over to 1247 Maple Street immediately. We have an illegal demolition in progress. Karen, slow down. What kind of demolition? The new resident is destroying his pool without permits. This is a clear violation of city ordinances and our HOA covenants. She paced across her pristine white carpet, leaving small indentations with each step. I'm documenting everything from my window. Did you try talking to him first? That's not my responsibility. Rules are rules, Danny. If we let one person slide, the whole neighborhood turns into chaos. After hanging up, Karen positioned herself at the window with her tablet, taking photos and video of the excavator at work. She documented timestamps, noted the contractor's license plate, and began drafting her violation notice. This was exactly the kind of precedent-setting case that would remind everyone in Willowbrook Estates who maintained order around here. The excavator operator noticed her watching and waved. Karen didn't wave back. She wasn't there to make friends. She was there to protect property values and community standards. Marcus emerged from his house, dressed in jeans and a faded college shirt, completely oblivious to the storm heading his way. Enjoy your little demolition project, Karen whispered, zooming in with her tablet camera, because it's about to become very expensive. Her phone buzzed with a text from Danny. On my way. This better be worth the drive. Karen smiled for the first time that morning. It would be worth it. By the time she was finished, Marcus would understand that Willowbrook Estates operated under her rules, not his checkbook.